Hello and welcome to the Sunday Times Culture Show. I'm Grant Tucker.
And I'm Makita Oliver. On this week's show, we talk to Lily Cole, who's been in Glasgow for the Cop26 summit, about carving out a more sustainable future.
And on the day Spencer's released in cinemas, the Sunday Times royal editor, Roya Nikar, will be here to examine our deep-seated fascination with royals on page, stage and screen. But first, Jonathan Dean's here to run us through the best and worst films out this week. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, both of you.
Hi, we missed you.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. So on Netflix this week, The Harder They Fall. It's the new age Western, produced by Jay-Z and directed by James Samuel, starring an incredible ensemble cast of brilliant black actors, including Idris Elba and Regina King, and the music is banging.
Now, how much? How much can be gathered?
10,000. Maybe 15 if every last cent can be squeezed.
Ain't nobody to leave town until we collect it all.
And if you fail to comply, you and everything you love will burn.
The music is terrific. It really keeps you going. Obviously, it's a big deal in the history of the Westerns to have a black cast. But I think, essentially, if you like Westerns, you'll like it. I mean, all Westerns are sort of the same. They're a bit deserty.
They are a bit testy every time.
Also, there's revenge, which this has, because it tells the story about a kid who grows up and has to take revenge of the people that killed his parents. So, it's got all the ingredients that you want from a classic Western. So really, if you like a violent Western with a slightly better soundtrack,
Yes.
then
You'll love it.
It's great, but it is very violent.
And it feels like an evolution from the Tarantino-type Westerns of recent years.
The Western was always the idea about sort of cowboys and Native Americans, and it was sort of this idea about they're fighting and settling in the West. And then it started to change. There was obviously Brokeback Mountain, which was a very different Western. It has always evolved, and this just feels like the next evolution on.
When it comes to Westerns, you sort of do have to stick to those rules, it feels like. You can't sort of leave them too much.
Yeah, exactly. And there was one called Cowboys versus Aliens.
Oh, yeah, that
with
was
Harrison Ford, which definitely ripped up the script. So I think in a way it's better when they leave the aliens and just concentrate on the Cowboys and the Outlaws, which this does.
I loved just the way it looked, the fact that I've never seen such brilliant music in a Western, and I thought this is interesting, and then it sort of went back to the old format of a lot of violence. I don't think it needed so much.
Well, the cast were brilliant. Regina King, Idris Elba.
Also 2 members of Atlanta.
Yes, Zazie Beetz.
And
Lakeith.
Lakeith, yeah. And,
He's the crush of the week. He's the crush of the week.
Well, next up, it's the latest adventure from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Eternals is a bit of a reboot for the franchise and features the first openly gay and first deaf superheroes. So, Jonathan, is this just usual Marvel kind of the movies that we're used to seeing, or is it something different? Is Eternals bringing something different to the universe?
It's exactly the same as they have been now for what feels like 300 years.
They're a bit calling it in these days.
I don't remember what cinema was like before Marvel movies, which is a shame. No, it has certain new characteristics, and but it's just the same old stuff.
I mean, getting Chloe Zhao to
Oscar-winning director.
direct it, and an Asian woman. I thought that was something, and I do really like the mixture that you said, Grant, of sort of upcoming actors mixed with, big old legends like Angelina Jolie next to Gemma Chan. That's quite exciting, isn't it?
If I may.
Yes.
Right. The Chloe Zhao thing, I thought, this is great. That is really interesting. What Marvel do, and then what they always do. If you look at every Marvel film, it doesn't matter who directs it. They all look exactly the same. Kind of almost like it's a weird effect in Marvel films. It feels quite flat.
Yeah, it's weirdly homogenized.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're an auteur or even someone who's interesting, they're not going to let you put your stamp on it. So I can't really see that as a Chloe Zhao film.
And why are they so long?
Why are
This
they
is nearly
so long?
3 hours.
No, why are they so long, Jonathan?
I actually think it's because they're introducing like a dozen characters that, frankly, the average person doesn't know anything about. I think when Marvel started, if you weren't a big comic book fan, you've heard of Iron Man, you've heard of Spider-Man, you've heard of Thor. They're really scraping the barrel. They've been scraping the barrel arguably since Ant-Man. You need the runtime to let people know who they are.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you so much. We'll see you in a little bit, actually. You're staying today. Coming up, a first look at Sunday's Culture magazine. And Roya Nika will be here to talk all things royal. I did it for you.
But now, Lily Cole is a model, actor and climate change campaigner. She's been in Glasgow for Cop26 Summit, where she's been telling the world how vital it is that we start listening to Indigenous people.
There's a huge amount of data that shows that Indigenous cultures are kind of better, in general terms, better stewards of the land. Their populations represent less than 5% of the global population, but they hold about 80% of global biodiversity. And I think there's increasing recognition of the need to bring Indigenous communities into kind of the conversation. So yeah, that's my point and purpose this week is trying to kind of pass the mic to their voices.
Where I come from is one of the most beautiful biodiverse regions of the world.
We still have so much shortage of water. And why? It's because of climate change.
I think so often the dominant narrative around climate and sustainability has been one of sacrifice. You know, you need to eat less meat, you need to drive less, you need to fly less, you need to buy less. It's like quite a grim proposition. And I think that that's kind of a misrepresentation of the situation. If we look to like what are the actual things that make people happy, if you speak to psychologists, like what are the most important things, it's usually, I mean, of course, there's a baseline of material comfort that's important. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't a baseline. But above and beyond that, it's relationships first and foremost, it's community. And I look to Indigenous culture because I think they provide maybe a different, I'm speaking very generally because there's thousands of different Indigenous cultures, but having spent time with quite a few Indigenous communities now, it does feel like there are different value sets that actually leads to happier lives. If we reframe the narrative to actually what are the deeper ways we can look for well-being and fulfillment, it might be that becomes a more sustainable path. So my book's called Who Cares Wins? How to Protect the Planet You Love. And it's quite focused on what we as individuals can do to participate. So everything from conscious consumerism and the different movements around what we buy and what we eat and how much we waste and what we use. I mean, the scientists are super clear, and they've been super clear for decades about the gravity of the situation. And yet that message hasn't really landed. But that's where I think storytelling and art and the creative industries play a really essential role, because storytelling, art, creativity is a way of communicating truths to a mass audience. I've been working on the kind of sustainable fashion space since I was a teenager, and the good news is it felt, 10, 15 years ago as a quite niche, quite unsexy, unfashionable space to be operating in, whereas now it feels like the latest trend in a way. It's like everyone's jumping on it and kind of competing to be more sustainable. And as consumers, I think that there are a few things you can do. One is just simply buy less, and buy things you really, really, really love, that you're going to make a commitment to looking after, and hopefully comes from fair trade, sustainable kind of business practices, or is secondhand. And then it becomes about loving stuff more, not less. It doesn't need to be a kind of monkish, ascetic approach to life. It's like, actually, can we respect the things that we buy? Can we pay a bit more to make sure we're proud of how they were made? And then can we look after them? For me, I think a massive reason to be optimistic is just that so many people are waking up. It used to feel like crazy to me that it was niche. It was like, guys, this is our planet, this is our only home. Why is people not freaking out about this? And now everyone's freaking out. It is scary, but at least everyone's freaking out because it makes sense to freak out, because it is a scary situation. And it's only with people waking up to that we will get the changes we need to see happen. So I'm actually really optimistic in a way that shift is happening.
What a woman.
Good on her.
Good on Lily. I mean, thank you, Lily Cole. She's so right. Returning to our wardrobes, wearing secondhand clothes. These are the ways forward. I have banged on about this to you. I'm going to take you charity shopping.
Where are you going to take me?
I'm going to take you around my ends.
Okay,
yeah,
I'll
I'm
come
going
over
to
to
deck
yours.
you out head to toe.
So I'm going to look like Kate Moss next week.
Yeah, well, we'll try.
Well, now we've got a first look at Sunday's Culture magazine. Makita, are you a Bruce Springsteen fan?
A big fan of his vibe, actually, of his vibe and his face.
Well, look out for the magazine this week, because there's a new Bruce Springsteen film, one that was filmed more than 40 years ago in 1979 at New York's Madison Square Gardens. Now, Bruce wouldn't release the performance at the time, but he's released it now, and it'll be available online and on CD and DVD.
Wicked.
Remember that? Well, that's one for the dads this Christmas.
Yeah, big time. And art critic Valdemar Yanuzchak reviews the Tate Hogarth exhibition. Valdemar describes Hogarth as a jingoistic loudmouth and an original Brexiteer, but he says you've got to make a visit for the most extensive collection of Hogarth work he's ever seen. 60 pieces, including Miss Mary Edwards and Southwark Fair.
Have to take a look. Now, on the day yet another Princess Diana film is released, Spencer, starring Kristen Stewart, we thought we'd take a look at our obsession with royalty on page, stage and screen. We've got a long tradition of dramas about royalty. Shakespeare wrote 10 history plays, all named after English kings.
Yeah.
Back then, people believed monarchs were divinely anointed by God. And yet all his plays were preoccupied with what it meant on a personal level to rule. And while subsequent historical royal dramas might centre around political manoeuvring, the personal is never far from the surface. To think endless wife swapping in Henry VIII's court,
Yes.
illicit affairs behind countless castle walls, Elizabethan sibling rivalries, or Queen Anne's fickle affections.
It's been quite a world, hasn't it? Today, absolute monarchy is a thing of the past, but there's still a delicious conflict between duty and desire for modern royals. It provides the creative germ for The Crown, for The King's Speech, and ITV's Victoria, among others. We just can't seem to get enough of those guys. And no one encapsulated that conflict better than Princess Diana. She rejected the stiff upper lip approach and spoke about an institution she described as suffocating, making her both a tragic and a relatable figure for so many. There have been 4 filmed depictions, 9 TV portrayals, and last year, New York playwright Joe DiPietro released a stage show, Diana the Musical. Did we need that? But the wonderful Kristen Stewart is the latest to take on the fawn-like stare.
Well, here, in this house, there is no future. Past and the present are the same thing. Diana, they can't change. You have to change.
You have to be able to do things you hate.
You hate?
There has to be 2 of you. There's the real one and the one they take pictures of. Diana, for the good of the country.
For the country.
Jonathan's still with us, and Sunday Times royal editor Roya Nikar's here too. Roya, let's start with Diana. Do you think all these kind of reinterpretations add anything to our understanding of the princess?
The constant sort of reinterpretation of her at the moment with things like The Crown, with things like Spencer, I think they're more based on directors and producers' sort of take on her being a very commercially viable prospect rather than actually adding to our understanding of her character.
And in terms of this interpretation, what did you both think of Spencer?
I didn't love it. Would be my diplomatic answer. I know it's not supposed to be based on pure fact, but I felt like Pablo Larraín just played fast and loose quite often. And for me, it felt like he was trying to be sympathetic, but it's such an unsympathetic portrayal of Diana. Right. I felt she was very caricature in this film. I just thought some scenes were completely bonkers, I have to be honest.
Jonathan?
I didn't love it either, but I liked it more. I think it's a bit of a mess, to be honest. I actually really like films where not that much happens. And I also like films, I like the director did Jackie before this by Jackie Kennedy, which I thought was superb. And for some reason that worked, and this didn't work fully for me. If it was about a princess, but they didn't include any of the real names or any of the real people, that might have made it an easier thing to understand and do.
Or slightly more interesting.
It's a bit confused because you have this sort of opening scene where you get the mission statement of the director saying a fable based on a true tragedy. So he's saying, this isn't exactly what happened, but it's so much attention to detail in terms of costumes, the interiors of Sandringham. So he's trying to be quite realistic, and that's where I think you're right, it just gets a bit muddled.
And is it ever fair to blur that line between fact and fiction?
Of course it is. I mean, this is
TV needs to get made, Grant.
This is drama, and there was so much outcry last year about, the Crown should have it should have a warning before saying. I think you've got to, I get it. I get that a lot of people in America probably think it's more based on reality than we do, but I think you've got to trust the public to understand that they are watching a Netflix drama or a film.
Yes, we're not idiots.
It's not advertised as a biography.
No, it's not. And I think there are real people from this who are alive still. This, and I think The Crown to an even greater extent, doesn't really consider, I don't think, necessarily the feelings of the people who are still alive and are dealing with these really traumatic events that they all kind of play around with.
Yeah.
I mean, I do like aspects of this film, but one of the lines that I thought was dreadful is right at the start where Diana says, "Oh, she's late," basically, and she says, "Oh, well, are they going to kill me?"
Kill me, yeah.
And it's sort of like you're sort of playing around with something that, I mean, first of all, that's a really pathetic line. There were real people involved who were still involved and deeply traumatized by it.
Yeah, she was still a mother, a daughter,
exactly,
a friend.
But because they are royals, I think this and The Crown just sort of believe they can kind of do anything. And isn't it just all a bit of a dramatic joke?
That's certainly the feeling of all the royal households in terms of The Crown. I mean, their complaint early in the year was that exactly what Jonathan said. The Prince of Wales, Princess Harry and William and the Queen, they're all still around. And you know, that they are sort of, certainly in this film, it's like royal family equals really bad and stiff, Diana equals great, kind of, but slightly kind of off the wall. And I think you're right, a lot of artists at the moment don't really possibly take in consideration the impact of that.
But now, of course, we have the new guard. We have the funky crew, funky new crew. We have Kate, we have William, we have Harry and Meghan, for goodness sake. Are they changing things for the better?
By and large, every time there's a poll done, you know, the younger guard like William and Kate seem to be relatively popular and people seem not to be sort of too offended by them. So even with all the sort of scandals going around now, it's a very different picture to the Wild West of the 80s.
But you are the person that is able to tell us which of the royals are actually watching The Crown.
Well,
Come on,
inside
Mariah.
scoop.
What you got?
So the Duchess of Cornwall has watched it. Camilla has watched it. Bits of it. I believe William has watched bits of it. We know that Harry has watched it because he told James Corden on a double-decker bus he thinks The Crown is more accurate than most of the British media.
Is that what he actually said?
Yes. So yeah,
The Queen?
I don't think the Queen has watched it. No. Okay. But we know she's a Line of Duty fan, and she is very good at talking to her various aides about it. So she'll have had cough and spit about plot lines, I can assure you.
Oh my God, Roy, please come back and give us gossip every week. That was great. Guys, thank you, Jonathan, Roy, thank you so much.
That's all we've got time for this week, but we'll be back same time next week. Camilla Long will be with us to run down all the must-see telly, so don't miss it.
And we'll speak to Tim Minchin about 10 years of his wonderful, joyous, massive hit musical that is Matilda. Do continue to share, like, and subscribe to the show, and just don't stop talking about us whenever you see someone new.
Till next week, goodbye.
Goodbye.